Cool. I'm Mike. I work on our app ecosystem team, and I also work on our international team. Those teams work very closely together. I'm sure there's many people here that are not from Canada. Anyone put their hands up? Not from the US? All right, great international contingent. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But what I want to talk to you all today is about a very important topic that I'm sure you've heard a lot about today already. You're thinking a ton about, but it's AI and the future of the Shopify ecosystem. How do we make sure that we're really taking advantage of everything that's going on in the space? And I'm going to share some insights with you and then also tell you a little bit about stuff that's going on in the app and theme growth booth where you can dive deeper into your particular areas. So what you're going to learn today is you're going to understand a little bit about what's happening in AI from the perspective of the insider's view of the app ecosystem team. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some trends that we're seeing just to give you some insight of stuff that you probably have hints that are going on, but just give you a little more texture of what we can expect. Then I'm going to point you to some opportunities around your specific apps and also new app categories. Last year, Sherry and I, who's an economist on our team, she's very, very smart, digs through a lot of data, and we work really well together in terms of coming up with some of the opportunities to point developers towards so that they can help make merchants better. Last year, we had a bunch of conversations around what are the categories that we think are most valuable. And a lot of folks were taking pictures and want to talk to you about it after. So we figured, why don't we apply an AI lens to this and think about some of the factors of AI that are going to, A, give you some opportunities to do better, but then B, some of the risks that you can actually mitigate by adopting some AI practices and also really entrenching some of the things that are less disrupted by AI that are probably differentiators for some of your apps. Another thing we're going to talk about is segments. So a lot of segments, both internationally and like different sizes of merchants, intersect quite well with AI opportunities. So I'm going to tell you about a few examples of those and some white space where you can participate. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how our product has prepared, both on the development side, which I'm sure you've heard already, but more on our side about how can we help better distribute your apps, help you get through the review process, and how we can think about that together going forward. All right, so what happens now that we can build better, faster, and cheaper with AI? So I'm showing you a chart here that began to scare me a little bit. So I spent a lot of time with our app quality and app review team, and we do a lot of planning. So there's only a certain amount of people that can look at apps and review them. There's only so much technology that we can apply in order to automate the review process. There's a lot of effort that goes into how those two things work well together. So we'll look at requirements and say, when you're about to submit an app, is that requirement, can we identify whether it's suitable or not before it gets passed off to a human? Because we want to reduce the back and forth and also a lot of the effort that happens when people are going and reviewing those requirements. So we do forecasting. And we say, okay, what happened the year before? How many reviewers are we going to need? How much time are they going to have to spend on this program versus built for Shopify? And think about how we can help you guys the best in terms of getting you through that process. But recently we saw, oh no, the number of apps that are being submitted all of a sudden are straight line up. So and by the way, we think this is just the tip of the iceberg. With a lower bar to development. It's a lot easier for people to participate, so we're seeing a lot more submissions, right? So we collectively need to do two things. A, how do we prepare for this? And B, where do we go where they're potentially not going? Because if a lot of people are developing relatively simple apps, what do we do, right? So I'm going to help you prepare that, prepare you in this talk, and then you can go to the app and theme booth to look specifically at your category to help prepare. Sherry also did some excellent analysis where she looked at all the data around all the listings and all the app categories, and we found that there's 40% year-over-year growth in either apps marketed using AI or are in fact using AI functionality. So people are taking notice, people are starting to build these features into their apps. I don't think that's a big surprise to you, but I want you to understand what the scale of this is. And I expect this chart to jump in a similar way that those app submissions did as we continue to analyze it. So obviously, the big question that's probably in your mind right now is how do we monetize in this environment, right? So what I'm going to do is give you some tips on how we can do that. So what is the upside potential of your app? And how hard is it to automate core functions of your app? Those are the two key questions that you're going to want to ask yourself. And I'm going to give you some criteria that you should look at and think about in terms of whether A, my app is resilient to all the automations, both the good parts of it and also the stuff that can replicate the functionality in your app. Which of these things are safe for the time being? Like we know that this is advancing very, very fast. But in the time being, what are the things that AI isn't great at that you can entrench? But if you have stuff that's automatable that's in your app, there's actually a really great opportunity to look at specific criteria of AI functionality and apply that to your app and be first to market so that you can get a really great experience in front of people, they start using it, you build a relationship with them, and then you can be successful. So there's actually two paths to do this depending on where your app sits. And I'm actually very optimistic about this, like truly. I think we've got a lot of ingenuity in this room and we have a lot of people that are early adopters of this stuff and know their customers and know what can be applied in order to be successful. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those. And like I said, at the App and Theme Growth booth, you can actually click into your specific category and learn about those insights after. But I'm going to give you the roadmap before we go back down there. So exploring AI upside potential. So there's 4 categories on here. I'm going to go through 7 of them. And like I said, you're literally able to go down to the booth and click on your category and see how these apply to your specific app. The first is content generation. This seems like a relatively straightforward one, but what if, for example, you could use content generation through text, imagery, video, or code to simplify merchant work? So say you have product bundle imagery that you can automatically generate. That's an example there. What about conversational UIs? This is probably the one that you may think about the most, is the most synonymous with AI functionality for obvious reasons with ChatGPT, et cetera. How can you use natural language interfaces to make your app easier to use? So some examples here are, what if you make settings and configuration that are usually people are fumbling around in an app and really confused, or you're using conversational AI to do help and support. But what if you made it really simple through natural language, to do things like, hey, I want to, get a buy one get one free offer this weekend on red shoes, and you could simply ask for that with natural language. That's an example of how you could use this. Second one is, maybe a merchant wants to set up, an international returns policy. What if they could ask you to do that in natural language as opposed to going through and configuring that in a really complex way where the failure rate is probably going to be relatively high. So think about simple ways you can use conversational UI in your product. Analytics is also a great example here. Analytics are moving towards, obviously recommendations, but gone are probably going to be the days of simply just looking at a dashboard like I do a lot of days looking at data. What if you could just query it with natural language? Right? So there's great ways that you can apply conversational UIs, and you probably thinking through your app category, you can think of specific ways to do that, but it's the second important category. Third important category is knowledge extraction. So can you extract insights from data to help merchants make better decisions? Examples could be, what if there's specific product variants that are, impacting what's happening in the cart, right? You can apply this to all the knowledge, and first-party data is great as well, of what's happening and extract knowledge in order to have intelligent insights for your app. Fourth is hyper-personalization. I've worked in ads before this and machine learning and all that stuff. Personalization is, been going on forever, but now we can get hyper-personalized, and AI is really supercharging this. What if you could, go and look at purchase behavior and offer, really profitable loyalty rewards for how people have purchased in the past? Think about ways that you can apply this to your app, and it's going to vary category by category, but this is another category that you should be thinking of in terms of exploring AI upside potential. Vision understanding, crazy. AI can see things, and it can do things when it sees things, right? So what if you could upload your visual content? You could upload, product photography, and you could very simply categorize it by things like style, things like color, things like composition. And think of all the simple things that a merchant could do or a buyer could do once you do that. Agent workflows. So, a lot of talk about agents as well. What if you could know that a delivery is going to be late and intervene with a customer, before that happens, right? Like that's very valuable to merchants, and it's a very simple way that you can adopt AI in order to make your app better. And then last but not least is autonomous optimization. Looking across all the different marketing channels that you have, automatically optimizing for ROI. Some of you probably also offer differentiated channels that are specific to what a merchant wants to do. What if you look at that across all the other marketing channels and you're able to really look at that and do autonomous optimization on top of it? What if you want to offer pricing to different customers and you're able to ingest data like weather, data like what my competitors and how they're pricing things, and automatically give yourself tips in order to let merchants price more effectively. So these are just some of the flavors of, and like the top categories that we think where you can take those, apply them to your apps, think of which ones of these matter the most for your category. And like I said, we'll come down and talk to Sherry and I, and we can look category by category and see which of these ones we think are most important for your apps, and we can have a conversation about that. So AI is very good, but there are just some things that it cannot do yet. I know, the most optimistic people that are most bullish about AI think it can do everything or will do everything tomorrow. But there are some things that it just cannot do well yet. And we need to think about those as well. So resisting automation, and some of the categories that are resisting automation are things like connection to the physical world, right? Does your app connect to physical hardware, production, or logistics? AI isn't great at relationships yet. Maybe one day it will be. Some people maybe are talking to AI and having pseudo relationships with them already. But complex B2B relationships, probably less so much, or not so much, right? So, does your app and the relationships that you've built allow those connections to persist? That's not something that AI can disrupt today. Proprietary data. These things are very data hungry, and they need data in order to make good decisions. Do you have proprietary data that you're generating, right? How can you continue to create that moat for yourself? That is another resistant category, and you should nurture that in order to maintain that resistance. Network effects. Does your app become more valuable as more merchants or customers use it? That's something that AI cannot replicate, right? Like distribution, marketing, that's largely in your control right now. And if you're unlocking value by adding more users, that's something that you should continue to nurture and build upon. We talked a lot about international at the start of this, which is near and dear to my heart. Regulatory requirements, things that are extremely serious, that are legal related, that are life or death for business for a lot of people. This often can happen differently in different markets. Can you intervene and manage that for people? We talk a lot about AI use cases where it's super important to let users or humans intervene when it's a serious decision. That's talked about a lot in the medical space. That's talked a lot about in the legal space. If you have specialized knowledge, relationships, path to market that considers regulatory requirements, we talk a lot about that with European merchants. It's super important for growth as well. If they trust you that you have this locked down, that's an important hedge against AI as well, and automating your app. Cultural and domain nuance, right? Like AI is really good, getting increasingly good at translation, but what it lacks often is local nuanced knowledge of a market. Knowing what works best for buyer culture, merchant culture there, that is a really important, even if it feels abstract, it's a really important hedge against automation. So hang on to that, and that's going to be something that's extremely important for you in order to be differentiated. I'm going to talk a little bit about that opportunity in a moment, partially because I really love international and growing international, but it's really something that you should take advantage of in order to grow. Do you have complex integrations? So, are you integrating with complicated technology that AI just cannot handle right now? If you're able to nurture those relationships and also execute that, that's another hedge and resistance against AI just simply going in and building a simple app and replicating what you can do. And then the last but not least is specialized algorithms. which is relatively straightforward. So for categories with high upside, there are really two key dynamics. So if you take all those, hey, here are paths to add AI features to my app, this is what we call reinvention. So this is categories where there may be some threat that apps can, simple apps can replicate some stuff that you do, even if it's not great quality. How can you use AI to be first to market to modernize your app using those first categories that I talked about? Second is augmentation. Here you're doing the same thing. You're saying, how can I use AI to make my app better? But you're also saying, oh, I also have this moat. I need to continue to entrench it. I work with physical goods, or I have, some regulatory advantage, or I have B2B relationships. Making sure you nurture that and continue to make it a hedge against automation is super important. So talking about those two segments and thinking about your apps, I know it's relatively top level and simplistic, but that's the first thing you should think about. Where do my apps fall on each of these? And that's going to help you define your strategy. So if you haven't been by the App and Theme Growth booth yet, you can take pictures of this, but you can also go and click into individual apps as well. And we're going to do our best to distribute as much of this information as we can. You have that first category on the left. So you see the y-axis. That's how much AI opportunity there is. And then the x-axis is how resistant are the core functionalities of those categories pushing back against that automation. So those are the things that you need to continue to nurture and make sure that you have those as your moat. And then these are plotted, and these are taking our app taxonomy using Gemini and some other data that we have to estimate where they should be. Don't be worried if you show up here, right? Like your apps better than we do. This is simply the median of those categories and where we think the median of those categories fall in those two quadrants. And what we'll do down at the App and Theme Growth booth is we can click into these individually, and it's going to give you all those factors that we discussed and give you an out of 10 score of, I should focus first on knowledge extraction. I should focus second on content generation. And how much will that give you an advantage for your particular app? But like I said, this isn't dogmatic or gospel necessarily. You need to think about your individual factors, but we just wanted to give you some guideposts of where we think things are going. All right, so just giving you some more examples to bring it to life. Think about something in the reinvention category. So here again, you want to iterate and release quickly to test and see what works. A lot of these technologies are relatively easy to work with, and you can deploy an MVP and see how much adoption you get. And the second is make sure you build a really great user experience, right? So AI can really help onboard you, right? AI can create user experiences that, if you don't intervene, can probably be a little bit confusing. There's also something that I'm going to share out. We have UX guidelines from a really smart researcher at Microsoft, released a framework that talks about the full life cycle of AI and how you should be thinking about building user experiences and some of the UX that you should apply to your products, and we'll share that out separately. Her name is Salima Mirshi. She's great, and she looked across all different product categories and recommended things like you need to tell the user when the system is still learning so that it doesn't have too much confidence in this recommendation, giving it a tooltip to make sure that you're guiding users through that process. So we'll share that separately, but the reason that I bring that up is the UX part of this is super important. Giving people control at the right times, onboarding, telling when the system's still learning, how accurate your estimates are. It's super important to contextualize that to merchants because a lot of this is going to be very new for them. So if you look at one category like upsell and cross-sell, that falls in this high upside, a little bit easier to automate category. What if you had a 60-second setup analysis based on store data, right? First-party data that outperforms generic recommendation engines. If you took those two things together and focused on a couple of those AI categories, you could really differentiate yourself from people that are just vibe coding apps and potentially cloning as well, and just pumping it through and getting in the marketplace, right? So you guys are obviously very engaged people that would come to a conference like this, you have that advantage to think about these things a little bit more clearly and set yourself apart from that stuff that's just being published on the App Store, with a little less expertise, right? Or a lot less in a lot of cases. SEO is another example, relatively established category. What if you could offer industry-specific content strategies and templates for specific verticals? Identify quick wins to implement in someone's first session. You can look at through the eyes of those AI capabilities and do that well. So the augmentation category, so high upside, difficult to automate. Here, again, you're playing that game of balance, right? You're taking advantage of AI features, but you're also making sure that you're really stabilizing and investing in that thing that AI can't necessarily replicate. So if you take a print-on-demand category, for example, assistive design tools are an example of how you can apply AI to make the design experience, much better using the power of AI. But on the physical goods side of the house, expanded product selection and improved print quality, a lot of that cannot be automated, right? So how do you invest in those at the same time in order to be effective? Inventory optimization. How do you have segmented algorithms to make accurate forecasts on top of a category that is very well entrenched and difficult to automate? So those are just a couple examples to bring this to life. But I don't want you to just look at this generically and say, okay, this doesn't apply to my app. Like I said, we'll go down and we'll look at the chart and go directly in your apps and give us feedback on it as well. And we can reason through what that would look like for your app and how you can put your best foot forward. So segments are extremely important as well. We spend a lot of time thinking about large merchants. Sherry and I spend, a ton of time together working on really fun stuff that we, maybe it's, just stuff that we like, but we like looking at how are different cohorts of developers performing in terms of building their business. Because when you guys build your business, it's great for us, great for merchants. So we're like, what are some of the factors that get people over the hump as a smaller developer or a mid-sized developer? Really unlocking use cases for large merchants. I think that resonates probably with a lot of people in this room. You earn 6 times more higher revenue in the first year when you launch that app if you're building for large merchants, right? And we can share more of the data behind this. Pretty intuitive, but I just really wanted to make sure that you understand this and also understand that you have the tools to do this well. And we're also launching more tools to get you discovered better. And I'll tell you about some that we've launched already at the end. So I'm going to talk about a few of these categories that are great for large merchants, but also overlap with the AI opportunity, right? So there's a lot of crossover between winning with large merchants and having great AI experiences. So one of the things Sherry and I looked at were what are the top search and conversion categories for large merchants? And so I'm showing you 3 examples. And in this case, for revenue optimization, top search categories include discounts, upsell and cross-sell, product bundles, and cart customization. And what large merchants need here, through the eyes of AI, are dynamic buyer pricing. We talked a little bit about that before. AI-powered recommendations, and seamless checkout optimization. And so if you look at the example here of Order Groove subscriptions, working with Bonafide, which is a women's health supplement subscription company, is they had a ton of growth in purchase rate and also a really big increase in subscription sales, almost 80% when working with Order Groove. And the way that they did this is having smart recommendations for disengaged buyers, identifying the optimal mix and timing of retry logic to recover failed payments, and doing that by adopting AI technology in order to get really smart about it. And this is something that a lot of you folks can do. It seems really complicated, but these tools and these techniques are becoming much more usable for people that aren't very, very deep in the domain. Another example, I know there's some folks here that are involved in analytics, and obviously probably very familiar with Triple Whale. But don't think you need to be as big as Triple Whale. There's a lot of demand for analytics. It's a very highly searched category for large merchants. And there's a lot of specialized stuff. And this space is changing a lot as well. Has anybody heard that Google's losing like a significant amount of share of searches to conversational AI, right? Like that is going to happen real fast. My wife works at Google, so maybe like not too fast, or maybe get another job. But We're definitely seeing something change, and we're seeing tools that are launched to analyze analytics in similar ways that we analyze SEO. You can start to see players going into the space, and if you apply an e-commerce lens to this, you probably have a pretty good opportunity to crack this space, because it's really, really messy and a white space right now, and no one really knows exactly how to nail it. And taking advantage of some of these techniques, you can probably make some waves in that space. So again, top search category analytics, what large merchants need. They need real-time monitoring. They need custom reporting and data visualization, and they need integrated marketing analytics. So Triple Whale's done a good job of this, of helping merchants actually make it so they don't have to hire more people to do a lot of this rote work, right? A couple things, I was actually talking to someone at the booth earlier. The way you should think about this is applying conversational AI on top of those dashboards. Again, like I said, I look at lots of dashboards. I love that I wish I could just ask my dumb questions directly to it instead of talking to smart people like Sherry or other data scientists. Using natural language to ask insights. People that are probably not super well versed in this, even if they're relatively large merchants, how do you give them the ability to use natural language to interact effectively? And how do you give proactive recommendations on top of that? And again, that technology is becoming much more accessible to people, and you guys know the merchant space really, really well. So how do you apply that in a way that's differentiated for e-commerce in very, very early days? And last but not least, marketing automation acquisition. Very highly searched categories, ads and SEO. What large merchants need: cross-platform management, performance tracking, interactive customer experiences. So here, the example is Tolstoy. Their video shopping experiences have helped dramatically with engagement and give a differentiated marketing touch point. Their personalized video feeds, which are powered by AI, recommendation engines, gives them the ability to be extremely effective while giving a large merchant what they need. And so if you can crack categories like this, do really well with large merchants, you're also looking at adopting AI technology that provides you with a first mover advantage to do really well, whether you're in that reinvention category or in that augmentation category. Locale specific differentiators. So every time I look at the stat, it makes me super excited for e-commerce globally. We're outpacing US growth in EMEA, which is largely Europe, by 30%. So Shopify is really going international in a big way. And you look at a place like Japan, it's also growing extremely fast, and it's the 4th largest e-commerce market in the world. And think back to those factors that I talked about. Japan probably pops out in people's mind as like having locale specific insights or gaining them, spending some time really understanding the users in those markets can really give you a hedge against AI automating some of the stuff that you can do at a pace that's not great. So really making sure that you can capture some of these markets before other people do is a super big opportunity. And these are the metrics that I wanted you to know about this. We talked about international last year as well, but we know most people use at least one app. We know large merchants for sure use them. Large merchants, a lot of the conversation we have about product market fit in this company is if you're a global brand and you're a big merchant, you have multiple markets that you want to work well in. So you need solutions that can work well in those markets. Apps can help fill those gaps in many cases. And only 5 to 7% of public apps are available in those priority markets. So you look at tons of demand, tons of growth, but not a lot of localized apps, right? So there's a huge opportunity there, and it connects directly to those things that hedge against some of AI coming in and be able to effectively replicate it. But on the flip side, you have tools like AI translation and also translated customer support that can help you do that a lot more easily than you used to be able to. So getting in there quickly is super important right now, and maintaining a foothold, gaining trust with merchants, brand recognition in those markets is a super big opportunity. So if you're thinking about localization as, I'd rather just go after US and it's the biggest prize, the momentum is moving in this direction, and it's a really great opportunity. So think about all those factors that I talked about earlier, and how do you apply those to go international? So just to close, I want to talk about how Shopify is preparing to. So we're making it much easier to develop apps. We don't need to go into this. I'm sure you've heard it many places already, but I just wanted to remind you, a lot easier to develop an app now. Part of the reason why we're seeing so many app submissions. But we're also thinking about discovery. So I'm sure some of you at some point has heard from someone on our team where you're like, can you please make really structured data with your app listings? It was probably annoying, but really important because we knew this day was coming. It's super important to have structured metadata to give to conversational AI, whether it's third parties or Sidekick internally. The way that AI works is it needs to ingest that structured data in order to make good decisions about the recommendations that they give. And it's really important to know that precision from these things is the expectation. So, probably gone will be the days over time, we don't know how quickly that will be, where a search query goes in, you get a selection of apps, and you select between those apps, and you have a consideration set, and a lot of the cognitive effort is on the user. The expectation is going to be that things like Sidekick and ChatGPT and competitors, that you'll get a precise recommendation, it's based on good data, and it matches the merchant segment that it's appropriate for. So making sure you have really great structured data and a really great experience that's getting foothold with customers is going to be really important. And so I just wanted you guys to know that because it's a really big deal. Now this all feels like, okay, the robots are taking over and it's going to be really impersonal, but they want authentic recommendations too. So if you think about editorial and telling a story, and you think about human reviews, which we're making much easier to collect in admin, we can talk about that down at the booth as well. Having that show up as context in these recommendations is also going to be really important because people actually want to see testimonials from users like them. But we need to make sure that we're giving these tools the ability to do that effectively. So think about data. Think about how we're going to be sharing that data. Think about the things that we ask you guys for help for. I just wanted you to know this is a context and what it's grounded in. More tools to increase ecosystem quality. I've had a lot of conversations with you all about, okay, we're seeing increase in copycats. That's something that we have our eyes on, right? The easier it is to create an app, the more likely you're going to get inferior copies of what you're doing. So that's definitely something that we're prioritizing. And AI actually helps us catch those more readily. So that's something that we're investing in right now. You may have also seen, if you've published an app recently, we've got AI recommendations for your app listing that help you get through, so that you're not having to do a back and forth with an app reviewer. Making sure that pre-submission process is a lot more smooth. We're going to keep doing that. And we're also investigating doing things like screen share and also agent-based work. So you can do that really quickly and not have to wait around for an app reviewer. And we're going to deploy them against really specialized stuff, just so we can smooth that out and make sure that we're really dealing with that influx of submissions in a way that helps the best apps, like your apps, break through. So that's another area that we're spending a lot of time on, and we've also launched functionality related to it already. Another thing related to my earlier point about structured data is we just introduced a number of new highlights. So previously, you probably saw things like works well with my industry, or works well or is relevant to merchants like me in my country. Communicating that to merchants works really well when they're going to that ADP and making decisions. We recently introduced plan, GMV level, and industry. So think if you're a large merchant going through and browsing, or you're somebody that works for a large merchant, or you're an internal sales rep at Shopify that's helping a large merchant. If you see that signifier and you made progress with those large merchants and get that signifier, it really helps the decision process for them and benefits you as well. So targeting those large merchants can pay off quite a bit. We also have the country version of that as well, like I said earlier. But if you think back to my first point about structured data, this is a type of structured data. It's Shopify is validating that this is doing well with this specific merchant. You send that to Sidekick, you send that to third-party tools. They can use that as a structured input to how they recommend a personalized solution to the person that's asking. So spend time thinking about how you gain these, and just know the background is it's really important to have that structured data in order for these to work well. And then last but not least, we're incorporating GMV into app recommendations now. So there's still going to be an experience where you're recommended a subset of apps. If you start to make traction with large merchants, your app is going to show up more often for those types of merchants and continue to get you growth. So if you focus and have like a really great experience for large GMV merchants, you'll have an opportunity for more growth, but you'll also show up in those recommendations to get additional growth. All right, so just to recap, go see us at the booth. Let's click into your categories and have a conversation about it. Give us feedback on it. Capture that AI opportunity, be first movers. You're a really engaged part of the community being here, so you're very well equipped to do this well. Build what AI cannot. Continue to nurture the stuff that it's harder to come and displace you and commoditize what you're doing. So a lot of you in here have really great advantages there. Identify them, know them, make sure you reinforce them. And then think of those key segments. Large merchants is a really great path to success. But look at that white space internationally, that 5 to 7% number. That is a glaring red light. Please build for me now. There is demand for me. Shopify is growing there. Let's just go get that. So that's it. So come down and chat with us. I really appreciate you showing up. And yeah, thanks.